Hello, welcome to Spirit Lace. Today we'll be talking about the danger of pride. We'll be talking about the danger of pride, and our text is going to be taken from the book of James chapter 4, verse 11 to 17. James chapter 4, verse 11 to 17. And our central truth says, when a believer is outside the will of God, he becomes a troublemaker and not a peacemaker. When a believer is outside the will of God, he becomes a troublemaker and not a peacemaker. Our memory verse is taken from the book of Proverbs, chapter 16, verse 8. Proverbs 16, verse 18. Proverbs 16, 18. And it's a very popular one. It says, pride goes before destruction. Pride goes before destruction. The evangelism emphasis is that when we judge a Christian without love and mercy, we are making ourselves lawgivers, whereas God is the only lawgiver. So when we give ourselves, when we judge a Christian, a fellow believer without love and mercy, we are making ourselves lawgivers, whereas God is the only lawgiver. We have two outlines for this class, and the first one is differences between constructive criticism and slander. The difference between constructive criticism and slander. And the second is the danger of planning without God. Danger of planning without God. You know, the Bible has a lot to say about pride. And I'm sure you have heard the saying based on our memory verse as well that pride comes before a fall a lot of time. But have you actually sat down to reflect on this truly? Pride gives you a false perspective of things. It causes you to think foolishly. Not just think foolishly, it causes you to think foolishly, and it makes you oblivious of danger. You must have seen a couple of clips of Apostle Joshua Selman doing the social media round, and it's quite interesting that what he said in that clip was very profound. It says that when you count 5 foolish people amongst your friend, you didn't count well. So if you count that you're surrounded with 5 foolish people, you didn't count well. And that hit a very strong chord. See, pride makes you take your life into your own hands. It is pride that makes you to say to yourself, oh, I've got this. I can do this. I can, just do this and this and this, and that's me fine. And it puts you in, and this can be very, very dangerous because when we have divine direction laid out for us, and then we choose to go down our own path, wandering aimlessly, leaning on our own understanding, that leads us nowhere. It leads nowhere. And I'm sure you must have read the book of Proverbs a number of times. Well, if you haven't, this is your cue to do that. And it's quite awkward when you see that, at everything it talks about foolishness, the attack that comes from there. Sometimes it's quite personal. I must say that the number of times that the book of the Bible speaks about fools and foolishness, and if you're very proud, you would not take it seriously. It becomes very personal and direct, and when you truly reflect, sometimes you begin to check and make it relatable to the things around you and around your life. That is how you really, really reflect on the book of Proverbs. When you sort of apply it to the things that are around you, you begin to really, really see, and it helps you to make adjustment, the right adjustment. When we stay fixated on our ways, then we lose sight of what God wants to do in us and through us. To really be able to apply it, it takes humility. God rules in the affairs of man, and as the omniscient, he alone understands the right situation in the circumstances of men as they relate with one another. Although man looks at the outward appearance, God looks at the heart according to Samuel chapter 6, 1 Samuel chapter 16, verse 17. This is why our Lord Jesus Christ admonishes us not to judge, for in doing so we may rely on the faulty premise of human. So similarly, because we are not the all-knowing God, we are not to bother ourselves about tomorrow, because tomorrow definitely will take care of itself. It is not saying we should not plan, but we must remember that we have limited knowledge about the future, and as we have no control over it, therefore worry and anxiety about tomorrow is a waste of time and energy. I know that our lesson is really, really talking about the danger of pride, and you begin to ask, how does this relate? If you take God factor away from your daily life, that is a form of pride. If you plan things and you're not asking him, that is one of the highest form of pride. When you think you can actually do these things yourself, or do whatever it is that you've got planned for yourself. It's good to plan. It is absolutely good to plan. But when you take God out of it, that is an attribute of um of pride. Now let's look at difference between constructive criticism and slander. Constructive criticism and slander. James, if you read James chapter 11, verse 4, James chapter 4, verse 11 to 13, it says, and I'm reading from the New International Version, it says, brothers and sisters, do not slander one another. Anyone who speaks against a brother or sister or judges them speaks against the Lord and judges it. When you judge the law, you are not keeping it, but sitting in judgment on it. There is only one lawgiver and judge, the one who is able to save and destroy. But you, who are you to judge your neighbor? Now listen, you who say today or tomorrow we will go to this or to that city, spend a year there, carry on a business, and make money. See, first, dealing with people can be quite challenging, but people would also test you. This is something that happens on a very daily basis, and it puts us in a place where we criticize or where we slander people if we're not careful, even if we want to voice out our opinion. Yeah. And this can come, and this can, and when we react, our reacting most times can come in forms of spoken word. And you might remember that sometimes the things that hurts the most are the things that has been said. And sometimes I remember growing up, I would rather maybe get beaten than somebody speaking to me. I would rather that, because the moment you feel the pain is done and dusted. But when I would rather my parents, I mean, growing up, I would rather they, chastise me by flogging me or by beating me, because I would rather bear the pain and then that is done. But on occasions when that doesn't happen, they continue to remind you, you will never hear the end of it. And sometimes those words can come in as, although it is correct, they are meant to correct you, but it begins to call you out over and over and over again. And you know, it can be challenging dealing with people, because I know people will test you. And when you want to respond to these challenging behaviors, or to their attitude, or even to their words, the only thing you can sometimes say instead of getting physical will be your own words. And as when the question is, has anyone said something that really hurt you, or you come away from a conversation and realize that everything said to you was very unacceptable? This can even come from close people like friends, relatives, colleagues, and superior at work. And let me tell you, you are not alone. See, criticism comes in two forms. It's either destructive or constructive. Both should offer a type of feedback that points out your mistakes or flaws or potential place to improve. But while constructive criticism uplifts, offers suggestions, and even provide possible solutions, destructive criticism is cutting, is derogatory, and sometimes even mocks our shortcomings and failure. Like it or not, at some point in our lives, we are bound to receive a form of feedback. And this can ultimately control what others share about us. You know, if you're in a midst of friends and um, something is said, you know, when they want to relate the exact thing that was said to somebody, it doesn't stay in that form. It is reprocessed and said. So it begins to expand. The same way, if the criticism come as a Christian, you want to think about what you're saying. Are you criticizing this person? Is it a constructive criticism or is it a slander? Because there's actually a thin line between a slander and a constructive criticism. But we cannot really control our emotions. We cannot control our emotions. But sometimes, actually, I believe we can control our emotion to respond to this criticism. And I have come away from conversations that I thought, oh, sometimes I might not get what they're saying immediately, but when I come away from that conversation and I begin to analyze the things that have been said to me, is I would do one of two things. I would either just, if I know I need to speak, I would definitely speak or send an email if there's need to, and voice out my opinion without it being derogatory. Because and and that is actually I believe that that would give us opportunity to discuss things. So also in the church, if you find a brother or a sister or somebody who is doing, things that are not supposed to be done, how do you deliver that message to the person? Do you just go to the person to slander the person, or you're giving the person a constructive criticism whereby you point out their mistake and offer suggestions on how they can improve? So a healthy response on, depends upon us learning self-acceptance. Proverbs chapter 15 verse 1 says, a soft word turns away wrath, but a harsh word stirs up anger. Our Lord Jesus admonishes us to refrain from judging people ourselves. Only God has the prerogative to judge. According to Matthew chapter 7, verse 1 to 6, however, we are permitted to correct with love and humility. Once we humbly correct our brothers who is indulging in sin, if he falls in, if he falls, Jesus' blood is able to restore. So if you find a brother who is indulging in sin, what do? And you know that you're supposed to speak to that brother or to that sister. How do you do it? Do you just go off on that person and, just keep going and going? Or you want to do that in love, you want to do that in humility, or you want to, you know, and I think you should think about things before you say it. When we correct our brethren with love and our approach should be constructive. And if it is constructive, it will be received with a better understanding. So sitting in judgment against our brothers and sisters is destructive and amounts to hatred. When we do it behind them, it amounts to gossip. Only God has the right to judge. Only God has the right to judge. Now let's look at the danger of planning without God. Danger of planning without God. According to James chapter 4, verse 14 to 17. James chapter 4, verse 14 to 17. It says, why? You do not even know what will happen tomorrow. What is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if it is the Lord's will, we will live and do this or that. As it is, you boast in your ignorant scheme, in your arrogant scheme. All such boasting is evil. If anyone then knows the good they ought to do and doesn't do it, it is a sin to them. See, do you remember the parable of the rich man in the book of Luke, chapter 12, verse 16 to 25? And it says he spoke about the parable. Jesus spoke about the parable to them, saying the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plentifully, and he thought within himself, saying, what shall I do, because I have no room where to bestow my fruit? And he said, this will I do, I will put down my barn and build greater, and there I will bestow all my fruit and goods, and I will say to my soul, Thou hast many goods laid up for many years. Take thy ease, eat, drink, and be merry. But God said to him, Thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Then whose shall those things be which thou hast provided? So is he that laid up himself for himself. So is he that lay up treasure for himself and is not rich towards God. See, as human beings, we are ignorant of the future and uncertain as to what time will bring. The man who plans without God presumes much about the brevity of life. For is what is your life? Planning without God is pride because He alone owns tomorrow. In fact, not just tomorrow, He owns your next minute, your next hour, your next 24 hours, your day. And He has asked us not to lean on our own understanding according to Proverbs chapter 3, verse 5. This includes all activities, even in the ministry, for without God, we can do nothing. God sees what we have not sin, because he's omniscient. We should also remember that we can be called home at any time. And how? We don't even know. But he alone knows. When we commit our plans, our ways into his hand, he perfects them. We should constantly admit the lack of our knowledge as a way of humbling ourselves before him, as he will always help us. He will never allow our feet to slip. See, relying on your own understanding exposes you to frustration and foolishness. The ensuing disappointment from actions like this can lead to any terminal disease like high blood pressure, depression, stroke, amongst all. To avoid this danger, you must never rely on your own understanding. In fact, I would actually like to share maybe a list that 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 signifies subtle sign of operating in pride. One of it is when you refuse to listen to advices or input from others, when you think you don't need feedback or constructive criticism, and when you have a false sense of entitlement. A false sense of entitlement, that is you operating in pride. When you blame others for your mistake instead of owning up you're wrong and taking responsibility. When you also take credit for certain success, when you also protect your position at all costs, that is you walking in pride. If you're also wrapped up in titles, oh, I want to be wrapped up in titles, you want to be addressed as a certain, yeah, these titles are good, but when you're wrapped up in it, when you're obsessed with your material wealth, your appearances, your possession, that is also a sign of you operating in pride. When you fuel unhealthy competition, who are you competing with? This race is your only race. You're competing with yourself or others. At the end of the day, when you leave here, it's by yourself you're going to stand before God. And again, when you fail to see your weaknesses, but you're finding fault in others, a lot of fault in others, that is also a way of operating in pride. When you're also an attention seeker, when you are manipulating to gain your way, when you're also living an hypocritical life, that is you operating in pride. Rebellious is a big one. Operating in selfishness, doing things for your glory instead of the glory of God, for the glory of God. When you believe you're better than anyone else, yeah, you mistake being cocky, yeah, mistaking being cocky for confidence. There's a fine line between being cocky and confidence. That's another sign of pride. Believing that you are right about everything. Again, when you're too stubborn to ask other for help, that is pride. When you're more concerned about your reputation than your character, that is pride. All those people that never apologize for wrongdoing, That is a form of pride. Okay? When you have an unteachable spirit, when you're disrespectful and you demean others, you want to be served rather than being served. That's pride. When you're bragging about what you have or what you do, showing off. Most importantly, your lack of prayer and praise time to God is a sign of pride. That is you walking in pride. And all of this has their side effect. There is punishment for those who do not acknowledge God. If you walk in disobedience, you will definitely get what you deserve. It is actually foolishness to do anything without God. And again, sometimes some of us would make plans before asking God to come in. Why not the other way around? When you turn it the other way around, when you're asking God, God, please, what is your plan? It makes the journey a whole lot easier and smoother. When you ask God, what is your plan? What are we doing this week? What are we working on this week? It becomes a lot easier and smoother to do life. Doing life without God, planning things, buying a house, doing a whole lot of things, getting married, starting a business, um, choosing a school or a university without God in it. You're setting yourself up for something. And it is wise. Those who are wise will acknowledge God. Those who are wise will take off their coat of pride and put on a garment of humility and go before God and ask. Now, let's quickly conclude our lesson. See, it is true that sometimes God allows us to go through certain things, but it is usually not all the time. Sometimes we are quick to say, oh, God took me through this, so uh, and God brought me out of this or that. When things, especially when things do not turn out right, or when we don't get the result that we want. But the question is it really God? Is it? Did He really take you through all of that you went through? And did He not just show you mercy by bringing you out of that mess? The truth is that nothing beats experience, of course. This is so you can tell others to avoid the pitfall if they listen. But more often times than not, it is because we often leave God out of the equation. We plan things on our own and hope afterwards we can invite Him to join us in our journey, instead of putting God first and finding out what He really wants us to do, and then with humility and obedience follow through. When you know where you're going, the journey is easy. Psalms chapter 35, chapter 37, verse 5 says, commit your way to the Lord. Trust also in Him, and He shall bring you to pass. The truth is that the journey could be easier if you find out what God wants. The fact that we do not trust God is a form of pride. You taking God out of the whole equation shows that you don't trust Him, and it's a form of pride. True believers do not have a mere reference of the will of God. They have the real preference for the will of God. We too, you and I too, must submit to the will of God, that all the details of our life, business plans, personal ambitions, education, goals, marriage, and family desires will be subject to God's final and ultimate will. It is important for you as a Christian to be spirit-filled and led. This is possible only when you make His word to be your companion to guide you. Your prayer life must also be vibrant and dynamic. By communicating with Him regularly, you develop a healthy relationship with Him. In turn, God will not allow your feet to slip. It is crucial to develop the habit of inviting God into all of your plans from day to day, whatever they may be. First of all, to allow Him to confirm if the plans are actually coming from Him. And second, so that you can receive the wisdom and the advice and the help. Now, a quick one that I would like you to get into involving. By the way, this is the Adult Sunday School class, and my name is David. Please, if you haven't subscribed to the YouTube channel, now is your time to do so. Just click the like button, engage on the page, drop a comment, engage in the discussions, um, drop an emoji in the comment section. That would really be nice. So the discussion I would like you to get involved is, give one example of an experience when you or someone you know relied on his understanding to do something only to regret it later. I know that in life sometimes we do a lot of things and then we regret them. So get involved in the conversation, and give me an example where you experienced, or where someone you know has relied on their own understanding and only to regret it. I have tons of experience of that. And I can tell you, I prefer the God's preference other than my preference any day, any time. I have learned, I haven't walked in disobedience for a time and paid the price, and sometimes still paying the price. You will prefer to choose obedience, to walk in the will of God and to follow through, and to make sure that you are aligning with the will, because when that is done, the journey becomes a lot easier and smoother. And let me tell you, God is still in the habit of speaking and letting you know his plans and letting you know his will. He chooses things and tell you, in fact, to the details of what you eat, to the details of what you wear, is interested in everything. And I want you to allow him, invite him, build a relationship with him. And I pray as you do so, the Lord will help you. Till I come your way, this is Spirit Laced. My name is Temitope David. Have a wonderful week. Take care. Bye.